All right. Step 1. We are using a 95% confidence interval to estimate, well, we're estimating the mean amount of time spent on homework at this large high school. The biggest thing you need to do here is to define your parameter. Step 2. This is called a one sample t interval. Or when we go to the calculator, it's just going to be t interval. Right? One sample, we're using a sample. And then t interval, because we're going to use t-scores here. Here come the conditions. Random, it says I took a random sample of 250 students. Normal, n is greater than 30. So we don't have to check any graphs, n is at least 30. Independent, in a large high school, we could say there are at least 2,500 kids. That's a appropriate size number for a large high school. So there's your conditions. Step 3. Here's your formula. Formula, plug in the numbers, answer, and since this is a t-score, we need to say degrees of freedom as well. So for your t-score, you should be using inverse t, and it should be 0.975. Your degrees of freedom is 249. And because the sample size is so large, this is really close to a normal distribution because remember the z-score for a 95% confidence interval is 1.96. So this is very close to, in fact, it was 1.96 something and then just rounded up to 1.97. So very close to our 1.96. Then for the calculator, we're going to go through all this fast and then I'm going to back up and see what questions we have. On the calculator, that's formula. Plug in your numbers, which I'll get to in just a second. On your calculator, we're going to go over the tests. And this is going to be a t interval. And we didn't put the data in a list this time, so we're going to go over to stats. And we want to write down our mean. So our mean was 10.2. Our standard deviation is 4.2. Our sample size is 250. Our n. Confidence level is 0.95. There's our confidence interval. So that is just putting in the information that they gave us in the problem, as opposed to pulling out from a list. That should be the only new part of this problem versus what we did yesterday. There's plugging in your numbers, answer. So remember, since this is a mean, we're using x bar for our statistic. And for standard deviation, we're using s of x over square root of n. There's the interval, so interpretation. We are 95% confident that the parameter, which is the mean number of hours spent on homework per week in this school, lies between 10.6768 hours and 10.723 hours. And so if we're looking at part B and asking the claim that they spend 10 hours a week on homework, we take a look at that interval. Is 10 included there? Yes. So since 10 is included, we would say that 10 hours would be a reasonable claim to make. So same process and we just are doing it with, the biggest difference is that we used the stats instead of putting all the data into list one. The calculator stuff was the biggest thing that was different.